Hello, welcome. Very nice to be here. So this is very exciting where we're playing. There's a lot of you who have been writing questions and asking questions and emailing questions, and the questions are really good. And one of the things that Roxanne and I wanted to do is begin to address these. Sometimes it's a lot easier to try to just talk about the answer to the question than trying to respond to you in emails. So there is a lot of emails, a lot of questions that have come in, and we're going to go through as many of them as we can do that. But first I want to really just kind of set this up in a particular way. There is an awakening, I guess you could call it, that's starting to happen in this shifting consciousness that we're playing in. There are cycles within cycles, and right now a large number of these cycles are all intersecting at the same point. One of the pieces that we've been talking about is this reset, this consciousness that we have been playing in is reset, this transition, this shift of consciousness. It's not coming, it's happened. And in the context of that, there is a segmentation. I don't want to use the word separation because that's an old word in the context of where we're talking right here. There's a segmentation, there's a division of kind of two choices that are being available to everybody to kind of play in. And the choice that we're playing in right here is one that steps into that state of well-being. We wouldn't even label it multidimensional, we'll just call it a state of well-being. And the state of well-being is loosened up considerably when a person can stand in present time and simply notice what's going on around me. And what makes that significantly useful right now is as you step into this space, I've kind of referred to it as a moving sidewalk, a different speed, a different consciousness. But on this particular moving sidewalk, in well-being, in present time, and simply not holding on to fear, because fear is in the other sidewalk. So in this space where we're playing, the ability to simply step into a place and be out of fear, find balance and choice is much more available to you than it has been in the past. The challenge quite often is everything looks the same to me, somewhat feels the same. I still feel the fear pushing against the edge of my space. How do I know that it's different? How do I know? How do I discern that it's different? And this is really pretty much where a lot of these questions are coming from. And it's simply the foundation of mastering alchemy. Discerning my space and Shakespeare's theater, that third dimensional reality out there, and I am not that. And in that context, I have choice. And when you can begin to recognize that aspect that I have choice very differently than choice that you've had all your life, the ability to choose a different choice begins to be much more simple. But the issue is, how do I know? And the rational mind jumps in and challenges it, but what if, and how come, and what if I don't know the right answer? And so that's a space that we're starting to interrupt. And many of you that are now playing in Mastering Alchemy, it was really pretty exciting. There's now over 100 of you that just joined the level 2 class. That's exciting. There's about 400 new people in level 1 beginning to learn these tools. That's exciting. So let me see if I can begin to address some of the questions around both this shift and issues like fear, because that's some of the predominant pieces that seem to be in the questions that have come in. So let me go over to Roxanne, and I know we'll go through that list of questions and see what we can really kind of come up with. So,
okay, so hi everybody. Before we get started, just a couple things. One is, when you ask your question, let us know if you're a level 1, 2, 3 person or if you're not in any program, because that way Jim will know a little bit more about where you are with the tools and on this journey. Also, just to let you know, we don't give any health or financial advice, and we don't go into ETs or conspiracy theories. We've also had a lot of emails or a lot of questions emailed to us and on Facebook and on Messenger, and so we'll get to as many as we can. And so I guess I want to apologize ahead of time if we don't get to yours. So, Jim, this first one is from Maria, who says she just started level 2 a couple weeks ago. Is there an actual difference between, quote, my own fear or the collective fear? I'm a bit confused. I understand that if I have integrated all of my own fears, the collective fears wouldn't affect me. So it must be that I still have fear that is being triggered by these outside events. Could you please talk about
Yeah,
this?
so let's see if we can set this into an understanding of the mechanics of how a lot of this works. So prior to having that sense of my space, the rose at the edge of the aura, and defining this is me, and that's Shakespeare's theater for my entertainment out there. Prior to doing that, you didn't have really a conscious awareness of discerning, is this mine or is this something else? And all the energy just passed through you. And so once you begin to play on your side of the rose, everything inside this space is mine. But you've collected a lot of beliefs, thoughts, you operate for habits that basically function from fear. I doubt, I'm uncertain, I hope they don't yell at me, they told me I wasn't a nice person. That's all still inside your space. So when you have a doubt, or when you have a sense of I'm going to be punished, or I did it wrong, fill in the blank here, that's inside your space to be cleaned out. That's what Mastering Alchemy predominantly is all about in the first year of all this work, level 2 also. That space of I'm not okay, they're going to yell at me, is really like a large magnet. And it's like a billboard that says, I'm afraid somebody's going to kick me. The reality on the other side of the rose, there are people that walk around looking for people to kick. And so in the simplest way, it's a wonderful match made in heaven, if you would. Or another way of saying it, law of attraction. Law of attraction says what you hold your attention on is what you attract to you. And so the discerning between, is it the fear out there or is it my fear, at the beginning of all this work, begins to be something that you become conscious of. And then you begin to remove with that 4th, 5th, 6th ray, 8th ray, the color codes as you begin to play with different levels of work. You start to remove that billboard. And as you begin to clear these I'm not okays out of your space, there's no longer a catcher's mitt or a big billboard to collect that attention point of somebody outside you. And so it begins to drop away and begins to drop away. And there becomes a point where you recognize, boy, I have this sense of fear, but it's not my fear. It's being the fear that's pushing on the edge of the aura. And that discernment begins to be something that unfolds as you move through all this work. Hope that helps.
Jim, this one is from Carla through Messenger. She's in level 1. In this physical experience with much abuse and failed relationships in the background, I feel very alone. I can only assume I'm getting to the deepest, darkest areas of the backpack. Any insight you guys can offer would be greatly appreciated.
Well, one of the things about, similar to what I just said, when I hold my attention on I'm alone, or I've failed, or I don't know how to navigate a relationship, and men or women are bad, and I'm usually the victim, can you hear all those billboards that are in there? And so it's really not that you're getting to the deepest, darkest part of all of this from the standpoint of it's beginning to become more conscious. You are becoming more conscious, and you're starting to notice what's in the backpack. But that doesn't mean that the backpack is a challenge or a problem. one of the things that happens in level 1 and level 2 particularly, as you start to have a sense of yourself, that on my side of the rose, those platform of words, and the ability to start recognizing I'm observing the world but not being part of that world, you then have the place to start to recognize, does this I'm not okay serve me? And you can do it from a place where it doesn't have an emotion attached to it. Again, 4th, 5th, 6th ray, 8th ray work, specifically in level 2. And you start to just remove these patterns, because these patterns are not in present time. And the question is, do they serve me? And when you're looking at it in present time consciously and recognizing what happened in a previous marriage 10 years ago, in fact, doesn't define me right now. Using those tools, you simply begin to remove that emotion and that baggage that was attached to the backpack that I've been carrying around. So it's not that you have to go into this deep, dark passage. People call it the, what is that? The
Dark night of
dark night of the soul. You know, I've never liked that concept, because it's something that happens if you continue to hold your attention on it and, oh, I'm too bad, I'm so bad, I'm so bad, I'm so bad. All you're doing is attracting more I'm so bad concept to that pattern. But the whole process of these 4th, 5th, 6th ray, 8th ray color codes allow you to kind of clean the dust off the shelf, because really that's all it is past dust that has no value or bearing on who I am right now. And so if you can shift the attention to, okay, I have some tools to work with, and I'm beginning to have an understanding, and this happens in level 2, beginning to have an understanding that my past, without an emotion attached to it, is simply information. This happened, that happened, I ran into a wall over here. But that doesn't define you unless you put the emotion in it that says, oh no, that happened to me in the past. Emotions only exist in present time, and therefore it might happen to me again. That's the miscalculation. But if you can get into present time, neutral, balanced, platform, rose, does this serve me? And is it in present time? And you simply bring it into present time and ask the question, do I need this? And you start to find you begin to dissipate a lot of those old patterns. The loneliness begins to go away, and the ability to begin to see new people to draw into your life, versus holding the big filter up that says, nope, I'm going to be alone. They're not okay. They're not going to like me. They don't trust me. That's a pattern that's not in present time. So play at this, and I think you'll find that the ability to eliminate a lot of that fear is actually relatively easy as you begin to play in the tools.
Jim, what do you mean by everything exists within the sphere surrounding us?
So in the level 1 work, you get into the center of your head, you get in, it rose on your side, and then that octahedron is taught. The octahedron has always been there. It's just not been used or aware in that 3rd dimensional space. Around the octahedron, that personal power field that's taught in level 1 begins to be the creation of that awareness of that sphere. But as we begin to move on this new moving sidewalk, as you start to step into this multidimensionality, begin to remember yourself in these layers of consciousness that you haven't had access to. Just because we've been looking down or buried in fear, it isn't that they weren't there, people never looked. So this concept of that center of the sphere, or the concept of you're sitting in your chair right now, if you close your eyes and you begin to have a sense of being surrounded by that sphere, the octahedron, the star tetrahedron, whatever level you're playing at, and have the concept that you're absolutely at the center of this. When you begin to also turn on and activate those triads, those 3 centers in the heart center and the head, above the head, and start to engage with that unified field of consciousness, what happens, you start to draw from those aspects of yourself. But instead of going to the 3rd dimensional mindset as I have to get their approval, I have to get them to like me in order so that I'm okay, They're not important here. I'm the center of the universe, if you would, not an egotistical statement, an awareness. And from that point in the center, I can begin to hold an attention on something, and you're going to find that everything comes to you. You don't have to get out of your chair to go get happiness. It's just simply you start to sit there, and this whole universe, in fact, everything, exists within this sphere. So keep that really simple and start to have the awareness that I can ask and I shall receive. And it's very much something where you start to create the reality that you wish to create, literally just sitting in your chair. All of these tools lend itself to that, but beginning to have a consciousness that I'm the center point and everything comes to me. Keep it really simple. Everything comes to me. You're going to start to find that having an intention and that law of attraction steps right into place, and you begin to draw to you what you hold your attention on, that intention. It's a different way of understanding who you are. It's very fundamental to this moving sidewalk. It's really simple, but simple is not a concept that we play in the game that we've grown up in. We're always trying to make sure we are doing it right. You can't do it wrong. And so this point in the center of the sphere, if you'll allow yourself to be curious about what if I just sit here and begin to ask and allow it to come to me, I think you're going to find some different results beginning to happen, particularly as this shift starts to engage, which is now doing.
Jim, this one is from Paul in Australia, and it reminds me of a story that you used to tell about a big guy and a little guy. Paul is saying, my boss has given me an ultimatum to have the flu vaccine. It will most likely cost my job because I'm very clear on not wanting this. Being a chef, this has never been a problem in the last 20 years. The pressure for people to be vaccinated seems to be a big focus point for many Australians during this time, more so than ever before. How do I keep it out of my attention point when it feels so strong from out there and feels like it's going to affect everything?
So this is something that happens when everything around you starts going into more fear. Instead of loosening up the experience and trying to figure out how to navigate something that together that we all have to deal with, people start imposing rules without getting into the whole vaccine good or bad discussion. But more specifically, and to Roxanne's point, the story, one of the things that happens is, let me go back to this law of attraction. It's absolutely a fundamental building block. What you put your attention on is what you draw to yourself. But the question is, I'm being imposed on. I'm not resisting the vaccine. I'm just not wanting to buy into it. One of the things that happens in this shifting space that we're playing in is, how do you wish to set yourself in motion? And what I mean by that is when you hold on to, as I said earlier, all those patterns and pictures and habits and beliefs inside my space, they become very magnetic and very much the billboard that attracts the attention of the outside world. So if I hold fear, if I hold resistance, if I hold the worry about, I'm going to attract what's related to that. And so one of the things that I've watched is, if I can begin to look at my circumstance and reshape it, I begin to get a very different result. But something like this, the story is that she's referring to is, I'm walking down a street and all of a sudden in this yard, this big guy is beating up this little guy. And my first impulse is to step in and stop that, because that's clearly not okay. But as I take my first step, I realize that's really a big guy and he might beat me up. And so I take a step back. And I step forward and I step back, and I'm in a real quandary, because what do? The reality is, I'm in the situation. So this one I'm not going to change. This one is what it is. It's right here in my face in present time. But tomorrow there's another one of those, and the next day there's another one of those. So now I'm stepping back in a bigger picture and basically saying there's always going to be something that's not right and that's going to jump in your face. So how would you like to structure yourself? How do you begin to build that platform? How do you begin to simply say, this is who I am in this state of well-being? And what happens is the next day you walk down the street, you decide you're going to take a different street. And in that same timeline, that big guy is still beating up that little guy, but I'm not walking down that timeline. I'm not walking down that street. So to answer the question right here, you're in it and you've got to make a decision. And you could possibly just simply create a space where you say, I'm fine, and not hold the resistance to either or. I'm going to lose my job or I have to get the vaccine. Maybe try getting really neutral to it, but you're in it. And possibility in that neutral that just simply says, everything is fine. I watched this happen where somebody forgets to even talk to you and ask you the question, did you get your vaccine? You don't have to volunteer. I'm not suggesting this will work. I'm just suggesting decide that everything's fine. Change the attention point. And in this case, the attention point is, I'm in an awkward place and I don't want. Well, that's a billboard. And that's going to attract the boss on Monday morning saying, did you get your shot? And take a hike. But if you simply can begin to get more quiet about it in your own space, less resistance. But again, you're in this one. So this may or may not take whatever direction that you would like it to do. But if you can recognize this, and again, I'm talking to everybody, step back, how would I like to live my life? And begin to intend it into motion. This moving sidewalk that we're now playing on is going to allow that intention to begin to be the movement through the noise without attracting the noise.
Jim, this one is from Yvonne, who's here today. She is asking, my husband, quote, knows better than me about the virus, about masks, about people dying, about what is really going on. How do we keep the energy of those who know better than us, who are really trying to help, at bay when we're trying to be grounded in our own truth?
Sure, that's a great question. So first, we are who we are. That's who he is. That's who each of us are. I do this to Roxanne all the time, even though we both are really conscious about it. This morning I said, well, you should do this. It's like, you should? Come on. It's not my place to create her. It's not your husband's place or your place to create each other. So, but what does happen in that space is like with me saying to Roxanne, you should. It really isn't a should. It's just a habit that I continuously interrupt all through life. But in that place, the real aspect of this is how do you respond to it? So who's got the rock in their backpack? And every time you hear should or I know better, it's an imposition. But if you keep resisting it, there's your billboard all over again. So what if you considered recognizing that maybe he's just unconscious? I'm not beating up your husband or anybody here, but I have a habit and my habit just keeps speaking. And I'm not conscious enough, even though I intend to break my habit, I don't break my habit, the other person's reality. But in your case, I'm the one who's getting upset. So something like he knows better, or she knows better, or they have opinions about all kinds of things. What if you just choose to say, thank you, that's nice, and move on? See if you can manage your resistance inside yourself, not to the person, but who's carrying the rock in their backpack? Who's really irritated at this? And it's me. So how do I change the platform of words I stand on? How do I change my response to? Can I get neutral and simply every time I hear that, just make a decision? No, whatever, just passing through me. Not rude, not arrogant, just simply, okay, whatever, and let it see if it can pass through you. If there is a question or a request to do something, then I am in agreement with this or I'm not in agreement with that. In that space, you begin to interrupt the game that you've been playing for a long time. It takes two to play a game. All of a sudden you stop playing. You get neutral, you get neutral, you get neutral. He's going to change. There comes time where you just simply say, you know, I know you're smart, but you don't have to tell me in so many words all the time that you know something more than I know. You find you begin to have a discussion rather than a state of resistance. Some assembly required, piece of work, but it's something where if you keep doing what you've always done, you have a tendency to always get what you always got. So allow him his superiority or his belief. Be amused in yourself, not rude, just amused in yourself, and let it pass through you. That's the piece you're working on. Can I not go into reaction? See how that works out.
Jim, this one is from Stephen, who's also online here today. And Stephen's in a program, but I don't remember which. I'm just going to paraphrase. He's saying when he uses the tools, it seems as though the issue, the trigger, is still there.
When I use the tools, so one of the things that's happening is everybody is beginning to become conscious of being unconscious. All of you I'm talking to. The average person walking down the street is pretty much, from a spiritual standpoint, unconscious of being unconscious. They just blurt out things. It's how it is. You've done that also. So now what's happening is you all are beginning to become conscious of being unconscious. I'm beginning to be aware that this stuff is in my space, whatever it may be. And so the tools are working. You just are simply becoming conscious. So rather than, oh, I put it in a rose and blew up the rose and it's something, some part of it's still there. Probably some part of it's still there. As you begin to become more masterful at using these tools, and that's why, for example, the rose works really well, exploding the rose. And then you get to play in the 4th, 5th, 6th ray. Then you get to play in the 8th ray. More potent tools as you kind of move through the work. But sometimes there's a residual piece that you're still holding on to. So the piece of information I would provide is there's no failure. And, oh, here's another piece that gives me an opportunity to create a rose and explode it one more time. Be nice to yourself. Don't expect everything is going to be perfect the first time you do it, particularly where you're playing in level 1 and level 2. There's so much to this. You're beginning to remember yourself, and you're playing at the process of remembering yourself. So the key is to really be nice to yourself. There's no failure. It's just like, isn't this interesting? Another part. Put it in a rose, explode it. Play with the 4th, 5th, 6th ray. Have the 8th ray begin to pull all those strings of thought out of it. There's no failure. It's just another piece. Allow it to be that, and it disappears much more quickly in the process.
Jim, here's a comment from Kathleen. Since beginning level 2, I've found that some nights I'm contained within the octahedron, and I'm simply observing the events in my dream, not experiencing them. Being an observer in those situations instead of an active participant is a welcomed experience.
Yeah, now this is something that's really a big deal because as you start to play in all of this work that you're doing in the body, when you go into the sleep space, there begins to be a place where you're not the effect of your dream. You're able to actually be observing your dream. Over time, as you begin to play in that, you begin to be not only observing the dream, you realize, I can change the dream. Really big deal. There's a place beyond that where you can start to, in the body, set your sleep space up at night for, I want to have this dream. I want to be in this space. And in the sleep space, you step into that space you intended and created in your sleep space, and basically set that in motion the way you would like to set it in motion, and then bring it back into the physical body. Say you have a meeting in 2 weeks, and you'd really like the meeting to move in this direction. Take it up into the sleep space. Set the meeting exactly like you'd see it, you want it to unfold, and then step into it in 2 weeks. See what happens. It's a skill set. So that's not just like, oh, he said that, so this is going to happen. Some assembly required on this because the sleep space functions differently than the awake space. But very exciting place to play. So congratulations. Good to have that working for you.
Jim, this one is from Karen, who is also on today. Please give more explanation of the moving sidewalk, what it is and how someone could step onto it.
In the simplest way, fear or well-being. Fear, well-being. Fear, well-being. Which one feels better and which one can you choose? Now, at the beginning of all this work, level 1, level 2, right, the early phases of it, you're very much a creature of your habits. But the tools, the rows and the words, particularly the platform, being able to start to observe in present time on your side of the rows and recognize I could react, respond, throw energy at, but I'm going to choose not to. As you begin to choose the pathway you want, the fear or the resistance or just simply has nothing to do with me. I'm not going to engage in the politics or the opinions or the judgments or the right or wrongs. What happens is you find yourself in a state of more comfortableness, a little less resistance, much more ease. And you start finding that you're navigating your day very differently than you've navigated it in the past. That's stepping onto that moving sidewalk. On that moving sidewalk, there's less resistance, less fear than ever before, actually. And the opportunities are starting to be observed on that moving sidewalk. And all of a sudden you realize, oh, I could just do this. That's part of the newness of the move. That's always been there, but it's coming faster and it's coming bigger and it's coming with more awareness. It's like, oh, I get it. Oh, I never thought of this. I can do this whole, and it's right there. It's like a movie that just drops into your head, that wonderful aha that we all have every once in a while. The aha begins to happen much more so. Moving sidewalk.
Jim, this one is from Elizabeth. Is this era similar to Atlantis, or am I just being scared?
Why would you want to be scared? Atlantis was spectacular. But see, we only get slivers of the story, and so we believe the story is the whole story. It's not the whole story. In the falling time of Atlantis, it was challenging because in that particular time, this kind of whole set of things happened. A negative energy took over. Just like similar to this time in a lot of ways. The same negatives were always there. There was, in that particular time, the energy is just overwhelmed. And something that will surprise a lot of people is a key factor in the dissolving of Atlantis was the elementals. Not one of their prouder moments, in their words, but for a very understandable reason, the elementals participated in the fall of Atlantis. But Atlantis was spectacular, and you're going to see an awful lot of the aspects of Atlantis that were in well-being returning into this part of the world, into this moving sidewalk, into this evolution in the next 20, 30, 40 years. You'll see quite a bit of the opportunity that was presented in Atlantis. And the fear side of it is really the 3D, and the segmentation happened this time, where the last time we really wanted it to be one world that evolved. And then it got to the point where there was an opportunity to create this moving sidewalk, this segmentation, to where it was many would choose to be here and allow this to happen. And it didn't segment, it didn't divide. And so this piece got really ugly and ultimately kind of consumed the whole aspect. And it was just part of a cycle. But now you're going to begin to remember a lot of that cycle. One of the valuable parts of starting to be conscious in well-being, removing all the billboards, is that virtually all of you were in Atlantis. Well, remember, Atlantis was a long time. It wasn't just a 10-minute moment where all these things happened. And you had lots of roles. But many of you coming back, particularly playing in Mastering Alchemy, probably playing in lots of things, had some very interesting knowledge. And so it will unfold for you as you start to get into some more of this work, as it has for many people already. Hope that's helpful.
Jim, this one is from Sammy, who's online right now. How does the current global craziness influence the shift of consciousness?
So similar answer to Atlantis. It's really interesting. Let me make this real simple in terms of cycles. Let me use the United States. There's an 80-year cycle, and each one of those cycles ended and or began from a war. You had the American Revolution that set the United States in motion. Then you had 80 years later the Civil War, and then 80 years later you had World War II. And guess what? We're 80 years later. That doesn't mean there's going to be a war this time in the same context of world wars like that. And then there's another cycle which happens in 60-year increments, and those cycles are happening. And then in that 80-year cycle, there's an aspect where you've got 4 generations, and one is of the war, and then the next one is the children of the war, and they have a whole different opinion, but a lot of times they're rigid from their parents. And then their children begin to have not the war and the sense of the 60s, and they start to have more flexibility, in 70s and 80s, more flexibility, no sense of war at all. But they don't like the rules that were set in place from those that set the rules in place after the war. And now there begins to be a rebellion about, I don't like the rules. Look around. Does that sound familiar? And there'll be a rebellion, and there'll be lots of challenges that will come about, and there will be major interruptions in economies, in belief systems. You're watching the world shift right now in terms of, you used to have an industrialization, and you had a family core, and a great part of the family core was have 10 kids because the 10 kids had to work in the farm. That doesn't exist anymore. And then the religious nature of all of that doesn't apply today. So I'm not taking religion out of the picture for anybody, but all of a sudden what was no longer is, but we're still playing by the old rules. That's what's really changing right here. And every time you get to that point, there's a group of, in this case, old white guys, basically that say, this is how it is. And the young ones coming up and going, no, I'm stepping into places of authority. The young ones, 30 years old, 40 years old, 20 years old. I don't buy this structure. So look at the world today. Look at everywhere in the world today. You're getting reactions also in those that don't have and those that have. So you're watching all these tremendous clashes coming about right now. But this time is different. This time is this division, this segmentation. And the opportunity in this particular aspect of the segmentation is really huge, because you're the ones who are going to guide this next 80-year cycle. And the next 80-year cycle is going to be very, very different, and for so many different reasons. But one piece of this cycle is your evolution. How much of your spiritual alignment, you're recreating, you're remembering, you're rewiring, do you want to participate in? 100% for you, and 100% in service to others. See, I say it all the time, it's your radiance of light that is basically the guiding focus for an awful lot of people who can't see clearly as you are about to. See, you're remembering yourself. That's kind of what we're doing, remembering ourselves, putting ourselves back together. But it's just like Yeshua, and Yeshua says all the time, it's just step right into the space and hold the vibration of love, well-being, helpfulness, and just kindness. Hello, nice to see you. You're doing good today. Nice dress you have on. People respond to that hello. You're learning how to say hello. And it's in the hello that the ability to, at a whole nother level, of orchestrate a result, intention and attention, becomes something you don't impose on another. It's something you lay before them to choose. Service to others. But service doesn't happen without loving yourself, and loving yourself doesn't happen without the joy of service to others. 100% simultaneously occurring in one place. And that's where we're going on this moving sidewalk.
And that's a perfect segue to Cynthia's question. Cynthia is not in a program, but she is in Project Parkbench, which you might want to talk about that because there may be people here who don't know what that is. But Cynthia's question is, I keep wanting the world outside me to continuously evolve and be kinder. Is that me pushing against, or is that me pulling along with my way?
Well, it's both, positively both. So, but the question is, can you love yourself? Can you enjoy yourself? Can you appreciate yourself? Can you have a sense of certainty and clarity and I am capable? And then with a smile. That's not an egotistical presentation of yourself. That's an ownership. But see, that egotistical part, how we have learned in third dimension to perceive and, oh, that's my ego talking. Well, no, another conversation maybe during this session is the ego. The ego is so important to you and so misunderstood in third dimension. But this space of certainty and command and presence and seniority and kindness and graciousness, that's not ego. That all weaves together in a place where you see somebody hungry and you just simply reach out and the apple appears in your hand and you provide it to the little one and she takes the apple and runs away and never even says thank you and you smile. It doesn't matter what you get back because you know what you just set in motion. That's beginning to remember yourself, and that's what is in the process right here.
Wow, we're getting a lot of questions from people online, so I'm trying to keep up here. This one is from Meg. She's in level 1. I find the rose tool and others to be so valuable. With these tools in defining what is Shakespeare's play, how do I ensure I'm not suppressing emotions, such as grief, etc., at such times that it is natural to feel them?
Well, let's see how I want to answer it. You probably are. You probably are. So now when I say that, I just started level 1 or just started level 2 and I'm 4 weeks into it, you're suppressing things because you haven't figured out how to get them out of your space. Keep it really that simple. It's not that you can't, it's that I haven't. I don't know how to empty my backpack to a great extent. As you begin to play in particularly level 2, and you start to turn on the triads and you begin to create this unified field of consciousness with yourself, with Creator, and you begin to recognize these rays of creation are gigantic energetic states of consciousness that you play in. You use the rays of creation every instant of the day. You create with them. They are what makes the whole world work. Nobody's ever told you that, though. And then nobody's ever explained how they make the whole world work. So once you begin to have this sense of awareness of how do I create, because you're a creator being, how do I do it? How do I do it so I get the results I want to get? It's in that space that you're going to start to find that, again, something like grief, worry, victim, and then pick any one of your words, arrogance or embarrassment. These are who I am because when I was a kid I did this and I was embarrassed or whatever it may be. One of the key pieces of all of this work is beginning to understand this very simple concept. The past is simply a past present time moment where you had an event, and in that moment you had an emotion and a thought or an experience, let's call it. And let's say it had something to do with one of my references. I told the joke and thought it was going to be funny, and everybody laughed at me, not with me, and I was embarrassed. Anybody ever that kind of experience? And so I make a decision real hard. I'm never going to tell the joke again. Well, what gets lost is the past in third dimension is fixed and forever. I can never change that. But in present time, the past is just simply, without an emotion, a set of historical events that are there for you to observe, to choose from, to act differently, without an emotion. But if you go, oh, I had this event and I was so bad, and you hang on to the I was so bad, emotions, feelings only occur in the present moment. They don't occur in the past. So you can't feel the past. You can only feel the present. But something happened and I was embarrassed. Oh, I know what embarrassment feels like, so I will attach my past history all over again to embarrassment so I can identify it clearly with that moment. Do you really want to identify with that moment? Or would you like to not grab a hold of embarrassment and bring the event into present time and ask the simple question, does this piece of information support me? Does this embarrassment have any value to me? And then you realize, oh, I'm a pretty funny person. I tell jokes all the time. Well, do you want to keep carrying around this guilty feeling, or this uncomfortable feeling, or this embarrassment? Put it in rows, blow it up. Fourth, fifth, sixth ray, take it apart. Eighth ray, pull out all the embarrassment from all the times you've thought embarrassment. Clean it out of your space. Now you're beginning to clear that space out to where you can observe your reality and then choose it on your terms. That's this moving sidewalk we're beginning to experience.
Jim, here's a question from Madalena in Portugal. She's reminding you to please explain about what the project Park Bench is.
Sure. So there's really kind of three things going on in Mastering Alchemy, which is really fascinating to me, all of us. There's the coursework of Mastering Alchemy, which is really all about you. Beginning to clear out the I'm not okay, begin to recreate yourself, and begin to create that living light body and stepping into it and using it. Mastering Alchemy coursework. Then there's this Park Bench project that we saw an opportunity to create something that was important. See, all the thoughts you think go into, well, let me say it another way. You ever ask the question, where does a thought go when you're done thinking the thought that you just thought? See, they just don't go away. They go somewhere. And where they go is into this fourth dimensional space. The fourth dimension is not a physical realm, it's a thought realm. And so all the thoughts go into this space. And they sit there, and if they're really happy thoughts, they float up to the top. I'm making up a story here. Float up to the top. If they're really murder, rape, incest, degradation, slavery, domination, guilt, they drop down to the bottom, a little heavier. One of the things that also occurs in that fourth dimension, that fourth dimensional space, is the emotional body of the earth. And one of the challenges that the earth is having right now is it's filled with all the thoughts that ever have been thought on the earth. And a great many of those thoughts are all about war and domination and control and anger and etc. The earth is in a cleansing process. Sidebar. So,
Project Park Bench.
So in this space where we realized that there was an opportunity to begin to put in place a new architecture, this new aspect of the new earth, the new world that we're in the process of creating. As you create, particularly in a group thought, two or more gathered, you start to have the opportunity to put into the etheric field, that same fourth dimensional field, a series of choices for people to choose from. The park bench is not about control, and it's not about a perfect, euphoric life that everybody should fit into. There is no should. But if you were to create an architecture for a world that you would like to live in, what would it look like? Beauty, well-being, respect, kindness, gratitude, co-creation. So that park bench project is in the process of creating an architecture, an environment, a landscape of this new world that simply has a foundation in words and vibrations such as that. There's no should, there's no rules to fit in, there's no admission. It's simply a series of thoughts that you and many thousands of spiritual folks are beginning to create this possibility, this little bubble that says a new world, a new realm of consciousness to sit into. And this is the framework for this new world. If you'd like to come and play, put your attention there. If you would not like to come and play, there's other things that will be in the etheric realm to choose from also. But this one is being architected with all the great beings in the universe, starting with you. And we meet once a month for technically 12 months. We'll see how that plays out. And we are now 6 months into something rather significant happening. The key is come on that Sunday and sit in that Sunday, but sit in that space all week long whenever you're in a meditation. Think beautiful thoughts in that architecture. But on that one Sunday, 2 or more are gathered, much happens. Park Bench Project.
Just a little bit more about that, everybody. There's about 4,500 people involved in it.
Yeah, nice.
And we meet the second Sunday of every month, and it's during Pacific time. It's noon, so that it's available for people live who are not in the Western Hemisphere, people in Europe and Asia. It's a reasonable time for you all. And it's about an hour, maybe a little bit more. It's just a lecture and meditation. It's not question and answers. And then we record it and we clean it up a little bit and we post it in the Park Bench classroom. And so join anytime, and all the sessions are there. There's also, we're blessed to have a woman, Christina, who is translating both audio and in text into Spanish. So there's a link there for people who understand Spanish, where English is not their first language and Spanish is. So yeah, join anytime you want. And then there's, I also posted in the chat room here the link to that. And it's free, by the way, it's free.
You know, and there's one more piece of that. It's not just about the architecture, it's about you. So going back to what I said earlier about 100% for you, 100% service too. So if you can't begin to, no, let me say it another way. As you begin to like yourself, as you begin to enjoy sitting with others, as you begin to have permission, your permission, you give you permission to have permission to allow yourself to be capable, be gracious, be in love with yourself, you start to create this 100% for me. Selfish. Wonderful word, selfish. There's two ends to that stick, selfish. One is I'm going to step on you, use you, take advantage of you to get what I want. Nobody really likes that one except the ones that need it to feel good about themselves in some way. The other side of that selfishness is giving to myself, having for myself, enjoying for myself. See, when you get into that state of love, the ability to command your presence and the creation of this realm of service to others 100% is done in love. There's only one love. Oh, there's many gazillion configurations of love. But in that space of joy, happiness, I'm pleased with myself, I did good, that nice, comfortable feeling, that also is an aspect of giving permission to others, or giving others their sense of their own permission to step into that space also. So it's about 100%. It's not half and half. It's not, I'll fix the world and then I'll make me okay. Got to make you okay. Got to allow you to be okay, to allow the world to be okay.
Jim, this one's from David, who's also online right now. How does the ego evolve from third dimension density to the fifth dimensional less density and beyond? And what does that look like?
So I'll do that story. So in the distortion of the fall of consciousness, which was not a bad story, there was no bad angel in that story as religion has told it. It's really a pretty absolutely stunningly amazing story. It's a really exciting story, but you got to go up about 30,000 feet to get out of the noise. In that fall of consciousness, you were dismantled. Mental and emotional body was separated, brain was shut down, chakras were significantly reduced in terms of functionality. And so over time, when people are taught spirituality, I've noticed a lot, this may not be a universal truth, but basically the first chakra is, you're told it's all about the survival of the body. In that space, one of the things that happened with the ego originally, no, the ego is a part of the higher self. And the higher self, in order to navigate the fall of consciousness as effectively as it could, divided itself, took a piece of itself, called it the ego, and basically put it into a level of consciousness to play with you. And it was a teacher. And my simpleness, you would go to school and say, oh, or you would say, I just learned that 2 and 2 is 4. And the ego would say, wow, that's great. And I learned that 1 and 1 is 2. And the ego would say, that's great. And then the ego would say, well, what happens if you took 2 away from 4? And you would say, I never thought of that. And that teaching would evolve in that space, the job of the ego. But as that fall became very disruptive in a lot of ways, the ego would stand in front of you. I'm making up this story in simple terms. And it would take a lot of the abuse and a lot of the frustration, and it got damaged. The ego lives in the first chakra. The rational mind that you think with, particularly when it gets into anger and resentment and fear and those kind of things, the rational mind lives in the first chakra. It does not live in your head. And the first chakra is designed for survival of the body. So put those wounded ego, rational mind trying to make sure you're safe and you fit in, and trying to navigate survival. What do you think we come up with? Well, actually, look around. Third dimension is what we come up with. But the first chakra is not about survival, it's about well-being. The first chakra is not a concave disc that faces forward. If you did Robert Brennan's work, it's a wonderful work, is a little part that faces backward. The first chakra, second chakra, third chakra are spheres of light. They're not concave discs. But that's a part of level 2 where you turn all that back on. But the first chakra is about well-being. The ego is in a wounded state. And in level 2, in particular year 1 and level 3, you and the soul and the higher self start to heal the ego. And some great work has been done by the people in the light body already. And that reconnection of the ego and the higher self has been put in place. And so very much necessary for this moving sidewalk to unfold. So the ego is beginning to play less and less a role in your space. The first chakra being about well-being, it gets recreated. Second chakra about excitement of creation. And third chakra about the creation itself, the propulsion of the creation into the heart to balance and manifest as the apple in your hand. But the ego is in the process in everybody's space as this shift that happens of being really very much healed. And that sense, when you get into that space we're talking about of well-being, the need to be in fear, the need to be in doubt, the need to justify or make somebody else not okay before they make you not okay, that goes away. And this piece, particularly with the ego, is a cornerstone piece that's starting to be, everybody walking on this moving sidewalk is beginning to have that awareness in their space accelerated. Now, let me back off as soon as I say something like this. Let me say this as clear as I can. This will be funny or sound funny. Please don't believe me. Don't believe me. It's really easy to give up your seniority to somebody like me, sitting here giving you some really cool stuff. Don't disbelieve me, but don't make my truth your truth because I said it's the truth. It's my truth. I'm only going to tell you what I know as my truth. But your truth may be different than my truth. You might actually see this whole thing in a more expanded way than I see it. So please don't just accept because I said this is how it is, or anybody else, this is how it is. Make it your truth. Play with it. Move it around. Roll around in it. If it works for you, wear it as long as it works for you. And then, guaranteed, for many things, there'll be a new truth. Doesn't make the old truth untrue. It just makes it no longer a useful truth because now you have a bigger frame of reference to perceive in. That's an important piece because you're going to start to get bigger frames of reference. And you're going to wind up recognizing, if you can, I'm going to let that old piece go. That was useful, but I'm going to let it go right now because this seems to work really much better. I've already given you examples. The past is not fixed. You can put it in rows and blow it up. Wonderful tool. 4th, 5th, 6th rays, a more effective tool in many ways, not in all ways. 8th ray, even a more effective tool in some ways. But all three tools are absolutely superb for a certain purpose. So don't assume one fits all and therefore I don't need to pay attention to anything else. So this is a part of truth that you're figuring out for you. But please, I'll give you a lot of information. I'll point out a lot of things on this pathway, but don't give your seniority up to me.
Jim, this next one is from Tatiana. Could you please speak more about the role of the elementals in the fall of Atlantis?
No.
Okay.
That's a big story, and it's too big for right here. It's not a bad story, an ugly story. There were no bad elementals. It's a stunning story, and the reason that it occurred is almost unbelievable that something like that would occur. Story for another day.
Then this one is from Henry, who's online right now. How do you bring consciousness from the non-physical into the physical?
So you do it all day long. It's simply, again, one of those rays, very much part of the 10th ray. The 10th ray's purpose, many purposes, but one of them is to bring what is non-physical concept into physical. So no, there's two particles, there's two aspects of light. Non-physical light is a wavelength. Physical light is a particle. And so the bringing from non-physical into physical is literally transforming wavelengths of light into particles of light, into physicalness. So the 10th ray is the vehicle for making that happen. It's something, as I said earlier, you use these rays of light all the time. You just don't know it or understand it. So as you get a little bit more information about that 10th ray, it has a tremendous application of magnetism. It has an electromagnetic field. It uses the color blue in a lot of the work we do to create a very specific set of results, but it also has other colors involved in it. So you're starting to ask questions really correctly, and in this body in mastering alchemy structure, you begin to get pieces of information that allow you to recognize, I do this all the time, But now that I understand how it works, I can use it for this purpose, and rather than being sloppy where I use it for that purpose over there. You're going to start to become more present time focused with a clarity and an intention to do X, and then hold your attention on it, and that apple is going to appear as you start to move along this moving sidewalk. It's different, but it's much smoother in the process than how you've lived your life today.
Jim, this one is from Dina, who's also online. How can we navigate the uncertainty surrounding us? I meditate and spirituality helps me stay balanced, but the fear sometimes gets in the way of my peace of mind.
So this is something that is just simply real. First, you got those billboards that are in your space that haven't been cleaned out yet. I'm not okay, I don't deserve, I'm afraid they're going to get me, kind of things. Just know that. Make it simple. I know I've got these pieces in my backpack. Now you're beginning to have the tools to sort through that and clean out a lot of that stuff. But the piece that is real useful today is a single question. Is it mine? And so if you're starting to find this sense of fear in your space, particularly if you're playing in all of this work, stop, take a breath, be in present time, kind of find neutral or balance, and then just ask the question. In fact, here's a real simple way to do this, and you got to play at it to make it, to own this. But you create a rose, and then you just let the rose be kind of like a pendulum. It just simply, yes is this way, no is this way, or no is this way, yes is this way, whatever. You make up the rule, and then just simply start to ask the question. Is the sky blue? Yes. Is the sky orange? No. Play silly game. Just start to calibrate your rose to where you start to have a sense of when it leans that way, it does this. So in that context, you begin to ask that question. Is this fear I'm feeling mine? Now, really be real clear that as you define this sphere of light, you're all playing in this, as you start to recognize yourself at the center, as you have your rose up, there is a lot of fear in the third dimensional game, and that fear is pushing on the edge of your space. But sometimes you just experience it as fear. So if you can start to ask the question, is this mine or is this the collective consciousness, you're going to start to get a discernment between those two. And you're going to be able to be more clear as, oh, this is my fear. So what is this about? Eighth ray, clean this out. Fourth ray, clean this out. Oh, it's about X. Oh, put it in a rose, explode the rose. So you've got some real simple tools that allow you to perceive your reality differently than you perceived your reality in third dimension. The only difference is nobody ever told you these tools existed when you were playing in third dimension. So everything we're doing is just reframing your attention point to choose differently. That's all this is. This is not the right answer. This is just a point of reference, a framework that allows you to choose differently. So fear and ugly and domination and jealous, happy, laughter, co-creation, graciousness, it's up to you. Simply up to you. But when you ask the question, which feels better? Which do I navigate with a smile? That's the one that may be the choice you want to live. So it's all up to you. You are the center point of that sphere.
Jim, this one is from Jackie. I just started level 3. In the past, I remember you often mentioning that most people in Mastering Alchemy were baby boomers or of a similar age because they, quote, hold the dream. Why is that? I often wondered if I wasn't meant to be part of MA because I'm a millennial. I'm 31. But at the same time, it felt so right and so important. Could you speak about millennials' role with Mastering Alchemy?
Sure. So it just happened over the last years that an awful lot of the people that participated are somewhere between 40 and 70. And so there are millennials in there, and there's baby boomers in there. And a lot of those people are now baby boomers that weren't, when they all started. But the millennials hold, not only, you hold the dream. You have that dream. But to a great extent, a lot of the baby boomers came in when they came in to do a lot of different things, but in their space was the holding of that dream. The millennials come in, and their role more or less is to begin to facilitate the dream, to begin to move it into action and experience. And that's what you're doing. And, it's a funny thing, millennials get beat up for kind of not caring or being selfish or those kind of things. To a great extent, that's a wonderful part of the contribution. It's just labeled inappropriately as if it's a bad thing in some cases by some people. But the millennials, to a great extent, are also in a process of waking up in this space. And what you have to offer is very much in alignment with all the work. So the work is not about baby boomers. The work is simply about how do I know myself, and how do I put myself back together, and how do I step into that living light body space that gets reassembled when I have myself back together. And that's the body of work. So from that space, the millennials stepping into that body of work and stepping into that light body is really important moving down the line. I make a reference to baby boomers a lot because that's where a big chunk of the work is, and it's not something I necessarily do. I probably use that reference too much because there are now considerably more people in their 30s and 40s and even numbers in their 20s that are starting to play here. And in a way, I have to refocus my wording. I think that would be the better way to make it more inclusive. So thank you for that question. It's something I will pay more and more attention to.
Jim, I have a couple people asking about how to use the tools, specifically the rose, for physical sensations or pain.
So this create a rose. So going back to the very fundamental piece. So you have a mental image picture. Close your eyes, imagine a rose right in front of you. That's simply the format. The imagination of the rose is the creation of the rose. Clairvoyance is the picture that you see. So if I say puffy white clouds and a beautiful mountain and lovely green trees like the ones behind me, and the fog is moving through the trees, you see that picture in your mind. That's clairvoyance. Be really clear. That's all clairvoyance is, seeing clearly. Now, do you see in the past? Do you make it up? Do you see in the present? That's a skill set. Where do you focus your attention to see clearly? But this rose is a rose that you create. It's very versatile. It's got a lot of opportunities with it. So if you just start with it, I'm saying, talking to somebody who's not played with it at all, you just simply imagine it and create it, see it as beautiful, and simply explode it, and then recreate it again. See, it never goes away. You explode it, and you can recreate another one. Explode it, recreate another one. People used to say, oh, it's so beautiful. No, explode it. The purpose is it vibrates at a rate that is higher than everything that is lesser. Anger, rage, resentment, I'm making those up. If you put them in the rose will override everything that's lesser. The rose is a particular vibration tuned to you. The rose has an amazing story to it, but for another day. So when you start to play with this, one of the things that you do is, let's say you've got an illness or you've got a pain in your knee. And Roxanne, teaching a lot of healing classes in the past, used to do this all the time. And maybe I should let you explain that.
It's okay, you can go ahead. I'm dealing with
Oh, you're looking at all the things. So you basically have this pain in my knee. So take the rose, it's almost like reach out and grab it, make it up. I'm grabbing my rose, and I'm going to start to just move it through my leg, move it through my knee, roll it around in my knee, giving the command, collect up what's causing the challenge in my knee. and just play with it in that context and see what happens. You might need to do it once or twice, but quite often, as you start to play with this, it begins to change. Many of you, another variation on this, without even using the word rose, a lot of you playing in level 2, you start to draw that golden light into the body from that third triad. You bring it in and you direct it. Those of you playing in level 2, there's a place where you convert that golden light to a golden liquid. And that one you're able to draw in and begin to run through the fluids of the body, variation on the rose, and direct it to a certain point. But the simpleness is create the rose and start to have it collect up what's in the knee, what's causing the problem. Another variation is I feel I'm embarrassed. Let me go use that word again. I'm embarrassed. Where does my embarrassment come from? You ask the question. And simply, all of a sudden, there's your mother at 4-year-olds laughing at you. You got embarrassed. Put your mother in a rose, explode it. All you're doing is sending her energy back to her. It's not a screw you. It's not a bad thing. You're just simply taking out what's in my space that has me off balance. Who else is in my space? Explode the rose. What color is in my space? Explode the rose. Related to what's causing my knee to be uncomfortable. So playing with that rose space is something that is really useful. You know, I'm thinking I just did a Q&A, Roxanne, with a group the other day, and I explained that whole thing around the rose and the 4th, 5th, 6th ray. Let me see if I can pull that little piece out.
Nadine's on right now. She's
Oh,
hearing you.
Nadine, that piece we did the other day. Let's take that one piece in the evening class. I think the evening class was more different. And let's drop it in here before, whenever you get to it, we'll just put it in here.
There's also, I just posted on the chat room here, you guys, the link to the morning conversation that is about the rose, and also the link to all our morning conversations, which is on YouTube. And almost all of the morning conversations include tools. So hopefully that will be helpful. Jim, we are over time. We're like
Really?
15 minutes over. Do you want to keep going?
Yeah.
Okay.
Unless everybody's gone home.
No, we have 532 people.
Okay.
So
Do a few more.
let's see. This one is from Kyle. I'm a 30-year-old husband and father of 3. I have a deep feeling to start a small spiritual community, but I live in fear that someone at work might find out how I truly believe. Do I still try to manage this old game, or do I take a leap to follow what I feel like I'm called to do? And there was someone else in the chat room here that had a similar question.
So in the real fundamental piece, what's your truth? What makes you happy? Now, how do I be happy and not expose myself to somebody laughing at me or some level of embarrassment or getting fired because I believe differently than somebody else? You stay on your side of the rose. And there's a lot of things that when you engage with people, you don't have to tell everybody who you are in various ways. You just simply engage with them where they are and hold on your side of the rose those things that are important to you. Now, I say it really clearly from, remember that old adage in the Bible that says, don't cast your pearls before swine? What that really means is if a person can't have what you have to offer, don't lay it at their feet. Because how many times have you all known you tried to help somebody and you tried to make it better for them and they turn around and they bite your hand? They embarrass you, they laugh at you, they throw away what you had to give them. Just hear that is really simply, they could not have what you have to give. Or they could not have you being who you are. So putting it before them is an unnecessary experience. They're not asking. And if you just simply manage yourself in the environment where you get to play with your healing center and your tools and what you enjoy when you step out of your workspace, keep that there. We used to teach hats. So I go to work, I put my work hat on. I function within my work hat. I leave work, I take it off, I put my father hat on when I sit there with my son and play with my kids. I take my father hat off when I'm going out with my wife, whatever it may be. I go out to go canoeing, I put my canoeing hat on. Really get clear about creating lines, not walls, just lines of discernment. Because a lot of times where we get in trouble is we start talking about something we are excited about to the person who can't have it. Something you all will find in Mastering Alchemy, one of the questions that gets often asked is, how do I tell somebody what I'm doing? Because maybe they ask, or I want to tell them, share with them what I'm doing. It's really amazing. You're telling somebody what you're doing, and all of a sudden you just see their eyes roll over. Literally, you stop talking right there and simply say, boy, it was a nice day out today, wasn't it? And they go, yeah, it was really good. They do not remember what you just said. They don't remember. It just went right by them. There's no ability to absorb that. It's outside of their box. So begin to be clear of what you say to who, just from the standpoint of, can they have what you say? The other side of it is, there's no reason to be exposing yourself to something if it's clear that person is not able to have what you have. So try that out. I think you'll find some success in that space.
Jim, this one is from Kathy, who's also online. Why do I sometimes go so rapidly from ease and grace to panic without warning?
Oh, you're a bad person. No, that's not the right answer. What happens is the circumstance that you're standing in changes. You have to just kind of pay attention to this. I'm happy. I turn my head and there's something ugly there or threatening there. Really simple. And my energy pattern changes. I go from being happy to, oh no, this is a problem. It's just simply you shift your point of reference, and what's in front of you creates the response to what's in front of you. That's kind of backward from where we're about to go. So I'm in the center of the sphere, I'm managing myself, and I can look in any direction in my sphere, and there's a experience. So is the experience managing you, or are you observing the experience and then choosing how to respond? Is the simple answer. So if you can begin to start to manage, I'm talking to everybody, my side of the rose, and what is the platform I'm standing on? For this moment, I'm going to choose to be neutral. That's really a threatening experience, possibly. I'm going to be neutral, I'm going to observe, and then I'm going to choose to step off this train track because the train is moving pretty fast. I don't need to go into fear or panic. I just have to create a choice that allows me to step out of the way of what's there, or be neutral and simply let it pass itself by. More often than not, particularly at the beginning of all this work, you are the same person you've been a person. It's the same as they've been all their life. They see something and react to it. Third dimension is about reaction. Multi-dimension is about choice. And so if I can manage my platform, standing in present time, center of my head, higher mind, observing, and then choosing an action, that sense, that overwhelm will actually begin to be less and less and less, actually pretty quickly, as you recognize, I'm in charge. How would I like to experience this? Now, you get really good at it, even if it's a split second, you turn around and something's going on right now that you need to respond to. You start to become this higher aspect of yourself that knows how to navigate what's in front of you. Now, that's a remembering and a learning. No, wrong words. That's a remembering yourself. That's a beginning to put yourself back together. That's a beginning to rewire yourself, because all of that is there. It's just forgotten or been unused. So level 2 really begins to create a very specific space that says really one thing very clearly as you move through it. I'm in this world, but I'm not of this world. And in that space, you see awkward things and ugly things and threatening things, and they just are mostly in motion passing you by. Just like my story with the big guy and the little guy, if you can begin to build this pathway, you don't walk down that street where that battle is going on, whatever that battle looks like.
Jim or Kathy, another possibility is that there is with the shift that's going on right now, all the chaos and craziness in the world, people without tools are getting into panic mode. They're throwing their emotions around, they're not managed, they don't have tools, there's a lot of fear going around, so maybe those emotions that you're feeling in your body aren't
Right.
even yours.
Right.
Maybe they're the people at work, maybe it's your partners, maybe it's just the people in the grocery store. And so understanding that that negative emotion isn't yours can be very healing. It can switch your perspective, so you go, this isn't even mine.
Yeah, big deal. And let's even talk about that more specifically. I mean, right now in the United States, you're pushing 40 million people who have just lost their jobs. You're watching an economy that is not going to come back to where it was before. Now take that and put it out into the rest of the world, and you've got a massive adjustment that's going on. People are off balance. And this off balanceness is going to turn into levels of resentment, levels of fear, levels of anger, levels of frustration, because it's not going back to where it was. And this is a big shift. This is the biggest shift in 80 years. And this shift in relationship to 1929 the world's kind of economic problems, particularly in the United States at that point, of being the leader of the new cycle, the rest of the world was damaged also. And so this one is going to be quite challenging for a tremendous amount of people. So having these tools and being able to manage your space from a place of observation and compassion, but not simply that level of empathy where you're feeling all of that. That's going to be pushing on the edge of your space. But there's a real distinction between empathy, sympathy, and compassion. Sympathy is when somebody hits their hand with a hammer, your finger bleeds. You are so matched with what's going on in their space that their experience is your experience. Sympathetic response at that level. The empathy, to a great extent, is just a little bit out of alignment. And what happens is they hit their finger and you go, ouch, and boy, I can see that really hurt. But you're feeling it the whole time. Your finger's not bleeding, but you're feeling their pain. Compassion is when somebody simply falls into the swimming pool in their wedding gown on the day of their wedding, and you say, this is a challenge. Reach down, put your arm in the water, pull them out, and say, we're going to do that wet look thing today. Compassion, how do I shift the focus to where we can make something out of this that is able to be navigated without fear and dread and loss and those kind of things. So those three words are big words to play with. We touch on them in level 2 in a couple of places.
Jim, I have two people. This will be our last question, I think. I have two people asking about blue light. So could you talk about how the electric blue color code works?
So the electric blue color code is a part, in this case, that is part of that 10th ray. And there's a part when you start to play out in actually year 1 of the work, we start playing with the color codes more than in level 2. And these color codes, let's not define electric blue, that's a specific purpose. But the blue color coding is something that you're able to kind of draw it into your space, particularly when you're in an off-balance place. And the blue color coding really smooths out the emotional body. And the blue color coding is something you can direct into also parts of the physical body for beginning to settle down inflammations or irritations, but it's a settling factor. If you sit in the meditation and let's say you are upset about something, and if you sit in a meditation and draw this kind of nice smooth blue color, you choose the blue, no particular one, you'll know exactly your choice as you choose blue, and basically bring it in and think of it as deep water, just moving slowly, and it just starts to clear out. And if you just sit there and bring it in and then sit in your meditation in surround, like sitting at the bottom of a pool or a lake or something, but the color blue, and then do your meditation in that intention. And you'll find that often what happens in that space begins, you get out of your meditation and you don't remember that you went into it with a challenge. So these color codes are very particularly valuable. In the Park Bench project, we're using this emerald green color code, which is love in balance. It's the fifth element of the elements. It's love that balances out all of the imbalances. Too much earth, not enough fire type of elements, and everything begins to be balanced. And it's a vibration that you could sit in forever and never master it. It's just an endless opportunity of amazement. So color codes, something we'll play with, and we'll play with those more in the next couple of months in the advanced webinars. So I said there were 3 courses that were going on, this Mastering Alchemy course, the Park Bench, and the advanced webinars have really shifted into a very focused class actually itself. And advanced webinars comes with level 1 and level 2. No, level 2 and level 3. So I hope this was of value, and please continue to ask the questions. If you like, we're thinking we might do this every month because there just seems to be so many questions that I can answer from the standpoint of this kind of a conversation rather than trying to put some of these answers into emails. Park Bench, if you're not part of that, you might consider doing that. That's moving along really nicely. And level 1 is always available to people, tools that you can begin to do all the things we started talking about here. So with that said, go away, have yourself a nice day wherever you are in the world. I appreciate you. Blessings.